and change in the political arena. This is about an hour and 15 minutes.
I'm not going to take it personally that they put us here at 9 a.m. after a rousing Friday night of partying here in Providence. But I'm so glad to sort of see all of you here and to know that we are being streamed live on C-SPAN and that the words and the heart and the commitment of these incredible, incredible speakers that we have are going to reach a very large audience this morning. So thank you all for being here, and thanks to Netroots Nation for putting together this incredible panel. So we're going to get right to it. This morning, we are going to be joined by a fantastic group of people who have a shared and sometimes divergent, but always exciting set of visions for where we should be leading our economy to move us out of the mess that we're in into a brighter shared future. We have Richard Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO. Erica Payne, the founder of the Agenda Project. Ai-jen Poo, the founder and executive director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. And last but not least, the only person on the stage to win a Nobel as of yet, economist and New York Times columnist Paul Krugman. So here's how we're going to do this morning. We're going to hear from Paul Krugman, who's got an incredible book out now called End This Depression Now! And we're going to hear from him for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to go into a quick, moderated discussion among these fantastic people, and then we're going to have 20 minutes at the end for audience questions. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite Paul Krugman to the stage.
So good morning, and thanks to Netroots for letting me talk here. Just a few remarks, because I think we're going to mostly do discussion. I want to say a couple of things. First, I do have the D word in the title of my book. Why depression? Why not something milder and more reasonable? Part of the answer is I think that we really need to understand that there's a difference between the ups and downs of the business cycle. A recession, roughly speaking, a recession is when things are heading down. A depression, we don't have a formal definition, but I'd say a depression is when things are down, when things are terrible for an extended period of time. That was the Great Depression. There were periods of official recovery during the Great Depression. It wasn't all recessions, but it was, obviously horrible. And so it is again today. It's not as bad as the Great Depression. There's a winning slogan, not as bad as the Great Depression, but it's incredibly awful, and you probably if you don't know multiple people who are suffering, then you must be living in a very rarefied environment. You must be, well, maybe a member of the Romney clan or something, but you're there are about 4 million American workers who've been out of work for more than a year, which is something that has not happened since the 30s. There is incredible suffering among young people trying to get their lives started. Every time I see some politician or pundit saying, oh, we need to think about the debt and about the burden on the children, thinking, what about the young people right now who can't get their lives properly started? So it's really terrible, and it's a problem, of course, across the entire advanced world. But in many ways, well, it's terrible in many, but it's certainly incredibly bad here. And the thing about it is that none of this has to be happening. This is not one of those things where, you know, we didn't have a plague of locusts. We were not hit by a tsunami. There wasn't some act of God that created this terrible situation. It was acts of man. And perhaps even more important right now, it's easily solvable. We've seen this movie before. We know how this works. It's been an interesting thing here because you tend to think that, well, people who are demanding that we solve this thing quickly must be, you know, crazy idealists who are defying the wisdom of economic knowledge. But it's actually the other way around. It's actually the people in charge who are refusing to end this thing quickly, who are ignoring the lessons of history and rejecting economic knowledge that we know from history. This is, you know, if there are some lessons that we learned, I thought we had learned really well, which are things like do not slash government spending and lay off hundreds of thousands of workers in the middle of a depression. I thought we knew that, and yet we've been ignoring all of that hard-earned knowledge. I actually have seen in advance of the review that will come out in the New York Times. You should know that the New York Times book review is run by Sam Tannenhouse, who's very much a neocon and makes a point whenever a progressive comes out with a book to find someone who will attack it. And it's not really an attack, but the reviewer is shocked at the lack of respect I show for highly respected people. I think he uses that phrase, like Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson. And there's a phrase I picked up. I don't know. Is Duncan Black here? I don't know. But anyway, there's a phrase I picked up from Duncan Black, aka Atrios, that I've loved and use. You know, applies to everything, which is very serious people. Capital V, capital S, capital P. And what we've had is we've been living under the tyranny of the very serious people who are partly defending class interests and partly just plain getting it wrong, just going with their prejudices instead of what we know from textbook economics, what we know from 80 years of historical experience, and are messing this up. And we could solve this. Solving this depression is not fundamentally an economic problem. It's a political problem. It's a problem of getting getting those very serious people out of the way and doing what we actually already know, which is why gatherings like this are important. Thank you all. Thanks.
So I just have to say one quick housekeeping thing. The clock is not on, and I will let these people talk all morning. So if you want me to do my job here, you should turn the clock on. So, Rich, Paul really laid out a problem here, which I think is a fundamental one at the root of the crisis that we're facing, is that there is a problem of unemployment, of underemployment, of a lack of economic strength and security among the vast majority of working people in this country. And if you look at that problem, there are a set of solutions that have to do with more government spending, that have to do with stronger labor unions, higher wages, that have to allow for a certain amount of inflation. In other words, the progressive economic agenda. If you reshape the problem, that the problem we are in today and the problem we are in across the globe is that the problem is high government deficits. There's an entirely different problem at the state level and at the federal level. And if you look at the problem that way, the solution is lower wages, cutting public benefits, destroying public unions. So we are in a moment where it feels like we have to ensure that the real crisis is the crisis of the day. How is the American labor union movement, which is implicated in both of those big economic fights, responding not only for its workers and its members, but for the entire broad working and middle class?
Well, whoa. That's pretty loud.
Yeah, it's good.
First of all, I'd just point out that every country in Europe that embraced austerity and the deficit solution, all 11 of them had an election and all 11 of them lost. It didn't matter whether they came from the left, the right, or the center, they all lost. And there'll be a few more that have embraced austerity that will lose as well. I guess I'd start off by saying this. Nothing will change unless we make a change. And the second thing I would say is none of us are big enough to do it alone. So we really do have to build a movement of the 99% that is capable of coming together, forcing a public debate on our territory, hopefully forcing the president to have that same debate with us so that he leads that debate and we go forward. Now, at the AFL-CIO, let me tell you some of the things that we're doing to try to make that happen. We're reaching out to community partners. And in the past, we weren't really the best partners in the world. The labor movement's idea of a partnership was when we had a problem, everybody comes and helps us solve it, and after the problem's solved, you get to go your merry way. Well, we're changing that. And we also used to say, here's our solution, come and join our solution. And we're trying to change that. So what we've done, we've convened a group of all the progressive groups out there, and we're talking about an economic agenda that will work for all of us. We will release it in mid-July. It was developed by all the progressive groups, all of us working together, so it will be our agenda. We'll use it as a test for our candidates who want our support. If they support that economic agenda, then we will support them. If they don't, we'll wish them well and send them packing empty-handed because they really aren't friends to us at all. The other thing that we've done is we've changed the way that we're doing politics right now. It used to be that we thought about elections in a one cycle. Now we look at elections in 3 cycles, 2012, 14, and 16, so that we can strategize over a long period of time. The other thing that we've done is change our system from a part-time system to a full-time system. We used to start 9 months before the election, build up our structure, have an election day, and then while we were celebrating election night, the people that tried to unelect the candidate that we supported are plotting and scheming somewhere else to take them, how to co-opt them. And before long, they had amnesia and they were with them and not with us. So now we'll go to a full-time program that'll be in place. So the day after the election, just like in Wisconsin, we'll be looking to build and bring more partners in, to expand, to mobilize, to educate, and we'll be able to move from electoral politics to advocacy, legislative advocacy, and to accountability pretty seamlessly and continue to grow in the process. Building that movement and staying together on the economic message is the best thing that we can do. And quite frankly, when our friends, whether they're in the White House, the Senate, or the House, or the State House, or anywhere else, when they get wayward somewhere, it'll be up to us to come back on the ground, hold them accountable, and make them come back to the main things that they ought to be doing, and that's creating jobs, creating more jobs, and creating more jobs yet, and creating an economy that really works for everybody and not just the 1% who have done so well over the past couple of decades.
So, Ai-jen, Rich talked about creating a movement. And one of, I think, the most intractable, difficult problems for the progressive economic movement is that there is a core inequality that falls from political inequality to economic inequality and then wraps back around again. So that the tens of millions of Americans who are most economically dispossessed are often the ones who are the least likely to vote, the least likely to contribute, the least likely to do other forms of political accountability and civic engagement. So that is one of the core problems that we face in trying to create a movement, not just for the 99%, but of the 99%. And you are doing an incredible thing. I just have to say, Demos just recently honored iGen as with the Transforming America Award because we are in awe of what she's doing. So I'm not exactly an impartial moderator on this, but you are doing an incredible thing to bring some of the most dispossessed and excluded workers in our economy into organizing, into political activism, and into transforming their own workplace and also transforming our economy at large. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, the challenges you faced, and the sort of potential for the broader economy?
Absolutely. Good morning. Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me? Yes. All right. Good morning. Are you awake? Good. Well, thanks so much for the question, Heather. You know, when we first started organizing domestic workers, it was seen as a marginal shadow workforce, excluded, and what we've seen over the course of the last 15 years is that the conditions that define reality for domestic workers increasingly define reality for every American worker. The instability, the lack of benefits and job security, the contingent and temporary nature of it. And so we've come to realize that we have so much in common as workers in this country, all of us, from every corner of the economy. And the good news is that from those places of exclusion and marginality, there have been incredible efforts to organize and transform working conditions. And there have been really big victories, historic victories like the passage of the New York Domestic Workers Bill of Rights, establishing protections for over 200,000 mostly immigrant women workers doing the work that makes all other work possible. And I think that not only is it a place to look to for victories, but to actual solutions that can not only address reality for those particular groups of workers, but for the whole workforce and the economy as a whole. If you look at the care industry right now, care jobs are some of the fastest growing jobs in the country, workforces in the country. And looking into care, you can almost see, it's almost the kind of window onto the health and well-being of the economy as a whole that manufacturing was in the 20s and 30s. So if we can really lean into some of these sectors, we can figure out how to set a tone for the kind of economy we want to be building in the 21st century. And I'll just say that care is continuing to grow as our country changes, and frankly, as we age as a nation. A lot of people talk about the changing racial demographics of the country, but we are also aging at a rate of a person every 8 seconds turning 65 in this country. And so there's going to be a growing need for care, and I think that that's a huge opportunity to lean in and reshape that piece of the economy in such a way that really recognizes everyone's human dignity. We can create jobs to the tune of 2 million new jobs in home care to make sure that everyone who needs care can get it. And we can make sure that every one of those jobs is a quality, dignified job, and that we can actually all collectively afford the care that we need to live with dignity. And that's the kind of agenda that not only will help us unite the country across race, class, and generation, but also help us get at some of the heart of some of our biggest economic challenges of the day.
So I can't resist this, but Erica, iGen is talking about caring for our elderly, caring for the senior citizens in this country, but you threw Granny off a cliff.
Yes, we did.
Will you tell us a little bit about what it is that you're doing to wake up Washington, to interrupt the media cycle that allows all of what we're talking about to be an excluded alternative?
Yeah, so for those of you who have not seen the Granny Off the Cliff ad, it's basically you hear America the Beautiful playing in the background, a very peaceful scene with a Paul Ryan look-alike wheeling a grandmother through a park, and then you learn that the Republicans want to privatize Medicare. And then the music turns very sinister, and she starts struggling, and as the cliff approaches, you know, the viewer is asking themselves, they're not really going to do it, are they? And we are, in fact, going to do it. And he hurls her off the cliff, and you see her body fall down. It was a fantastic shoot. It was great. The one where the grandmother was eating the cat food didn't work as well, so we didn't release that one. But but yeah, we spent $3,500 making that ad, and we spent no money on a paid ad buy, but it got 20 million media impressions. And we released it right as Paul Ryan's budget last year was coming out. And what you saw happen in the media cycle was that the phrase "off the cliff, off the cliff, off the cliff" went everywhere during this period of time. So we have Mitch McConnell protesting that no one's trying to throw Granny off the cliff. You know, and when you get them in that position, you know, then that's a win. Okay, that's a win. When the Senate Minority Leader is protesting that he is not, in fact, trying to throw Granny off the cliff, that's a win. So when we're talking about creating messages that break through, the way that we view our job is to look at the public policy process as this endless cycle of product development, packaging, and marketing and distribution. And the product may be a specific piece of legislation, it may be a value system. Ideally, those two things are connected, right? But the distribution is where all the cost is. So I spent a lot of time working on financial reform, and during the period of time that I worked on financial reform, the left spent $2 or $3 million advocating for effective financial reform in the wake of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. During that same period of time, the bank spent $600 million on lobbyists. And so there's an order of magnitude difference in financial resources that we have to use as the given to our problem solving. Okay, so we have to understand that they have $300 to our $1, $200 to our $1. So what we've got to do is find places where we can get $200 of impact for a dollar that we spend. So $3,500, you know, for 20 million media impressions, you're getting in that range. Our Patriotic Millionaires campaign, which is 200 amazing folks who are running around the country for the last year and a half asking to have their taxes raised. That campaign has been about $80,000, and to date it's gotten about 80 million media impressions. The way that we're able to affect that is because we don't worry who gets the credit for putting the message out. Okay, if a liberal advocacy group like the Agenda Project calls for higher taxes on millionaires, what a yawner, right? Who cares? Okay, that's not news. You get 200 patriotic millionaires, that starts getting interesting. So we lead with those other brands. So what I would encourage us to do, I know, you know, liberals love a coalition. I actually don't think they're particularly effective. Have your coalition in your planning session. Don't have your coalition in your outside forces. Why all get in a group together and make the White House take one meeting when if you all do separate things, think of little helicopters landing, seemingly unconnected. Do the helicopter strategy, you know, and then the White House has to take 10 meetings because 10 different people, 10 different groups are working on a message. And when you say something, just make sure that you say something that's worth saying, you know? I think a lot of times we encourage people to look carefully at this problem. You know, we encourage them to be accountable to voters. You know, When we did a letter about financial reform, we got 40 experts, market experts, to sign a letter that said, you haven't done financial reform, and until you do the following 10 things, you wouldn't have prevented the last crisis, and you won't prevent the next one. That hits your ear, you know? So use your bold language, use graphic images when you need to, understand that sometimes people need to say things in order to open up the oxygen for other people to say things. So when we threw Granny off a cliff, I headed to the beach with all my girlfriends and left the rest of our community of liberals to go on TV to talk about it purposefully. And what I said to them was, denounce us. Denounce us, say the ad's tacky, it's tasteless, blah, 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 blah. You know, I don't care. I just got you 8 minutes to say why Paul Ryan's plan is horrible. Spend 30 seconds of it denouncing me. Then spend 7.5 minutes telling people what this plan is going to do to Medicare.
So, Paul, I think we're in a really difficult place right now because even our president is talking about the need for the federal government to tighten its belt the way that households are tightening their belts. What is wrong with that metaphor?
Oh, wow.
And what should we replace it with?
Yeah. I mean, the way I like to, I've been actually trying, by the way, that was a source of intense pain. Because when John Boehner first used the tighten our belt metaphor, we all said, oh God, what an idiot. And then 6 months later, the president started using it, and we made us all pretty unhappy. But look, I think the right to say it is, we are not an individual family, we are a society. And what that means, if you are just some person who's overspent, then sure, you can cut back on your spending and try and work off your debt. But we are a society where who are you selling stuff to? We're selling stuff to each other. If my spending is your income, your spending is my income. If all of us decide at the same time we're going to tighten our belts and spend less, guess what? What happens is we all end up poorer because all of our spending falls at the same time. And by the way, this is the kind of stuff that we're supposed to know. This is stuff that we've known since the 1930s, right? The attempt of everybody to slash spending at the same time because they think they've got too much debt is self-defeating. And so that's why the metaphor is wrong. Now, I guess. Now you put me on the spot here. What's you want a three-word version of it? But no, I mean, I think the way to say is that you need to grow your way out of a problem like this. And growth means that somebody has to be out there prepared to invest in growth. Yeah. And look, who's going to do that? American households really are too deep in debt because they were led on by false promises and financial deregulation. Corporations are not in business for our health. They're not going to invest if they don't see a market. So wouldn't it be great if there was some player in the system that was in a position to say to take society's interests into account, to say, look, what do we need to make this economy work instead of just operating based upon fear and slogans. And gee, I think there's this thing called the government, which could be playing that role. And that's, I think, the way to say it. That we do really, maybe the investment metaphor is the right one. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And when people say, well, government should be run like a business. Gosh, if there was a business that could borrow at, as of, I guess, end of the day yesterday, 1.7% long-term interest rates, inflation-protected bonds, have a negative interest rate. If you had a business that could borrow literally for free and had lots of things that it knows it should be doing, it would be doing that. It would be borrowing that money and spending. So that's what we need to do. Yeah, and just, sorry, I'm going on too long. This deficit obsession, which we all talked about, is the most amazing thing. Because I was shocked that it happened, and we do need to fight it. Yes, in the long run you have to pay your bills, but as John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run we are all dead, and what we need right now is jobs. Can I just say, by the way, I thought that was great.
Thanks.
The way that people get silenced in my line of work is by getting accused of being shrill. That was everybody's friend. You've said something, you've not been respectful, you haven't been nasty, but you have to get people's attention. And if some people end up not liking you, that's okay, because they need to get the message out.
Because we get a lot of hate mail, so I'm really happy that it's okay if people hate you. I would love to pick up on what Paul said, Heather, about this household mentality with tightening the belts.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? If you're not feeling the question that's burning in your mind, if it's not being written on a card and being handed to people who are walking around, we won't be able to answer it. So do that as well. Go ahead.
I mean, I think it's okay just from a messaging point of view to concede the point that you know, we always want to be aware of our spending priorities, but a tree just fell on our house, right?
Perfect.
So if we are going to be forced into the metaphor of the regular family has to tighten its belt, well, you know, I'm an individual who decided to go to business school to invest $100 grand that took me forever before I figured out that maybe it might have been worth it. But I mean, you know what I'm saying? To spend on something. So investing in America. 4 years ago, we had the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. You know, so should we think about our spending? Absolutely. A tree just fell on our house. The first thing you have to do is get the tree off your house. And so the work that, you know, that within the Depression now, get the tree off the house, and then we'll deal with maybe we need to buy the less expensive peanut butter, you know, even though Jif is a superior brand. Do you know what I'm saying?
So Rich, about this question of the superior brand of peanut butter, I'm actually going to try to weave this in, Erica, thank you. So one would say, and we often do in the progressive economic world, talk about this period of sort of shared prosperity, this golden era between the end of World War II and just about when Ronald Reagan took office, and I at least was born. We had this period of time where incomes rose in tandem, where there was a much smaller gap between CEO pay and average worker pay, where labor unions were strong, where the trade rules, what of that there were, benefited and were conscious of the livelihoods of the producers of the goods that were being exported. All of that has changed in a way that has created fundamental economic insecurity for most Americans. We now have two parents working and able to create a little less security than one parent was able to create on his own a generation ago. We have people going into the workforce without the kind of security that they had with contingent work and contract work and temporary work. And so I'd actually like to challenge a little bit this idea that what we need to do is, you know, maybe spend a little bit now on some short-term spending, but then we should actually spend less than we even have been now because of our long-term deficit. It seems to me like we are actually going to have to do a lot more to put the American people on sound footing. We're going to have to make college debt-free again. We're going to have to make universal child care because both parents are working. And it seems to me like that's going to take a fair amount of money. And so I'm hearing from the American labor movement, not, you know, let's do this short emergency thing, but let's actually rework the entire package so that we're doing the kind of investments that are needed for the kind of generational transformational security. And yet, what's been the response from our allies? That's what I want to know.
Before I answer it, I would like to comment on your previous question. You said that there is a danger in the upcoming, perhaps lame duck session, or at the beginning of next year, about this grand bargain. And if you notice, more and more and more Democrats have been trying to embrace Simpson-Bowles. I would point out that Simpson-Bowles was never voted on by that committee itself. They could never get a consensus out of it. Second of all, Simpson-Bowles has some very, very odious things in it. Tax rates go down to 28%. They cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. So one thing that I think we need to do collectively is to give our friends a little bit of backbone and declare, as we have, that we will fight and oppose any cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, regardless of who proposes it. We will fight against it, so that they don't get the notion that the rich had a party and we get to pay yet again for the party that they had that we weren't attending to. Now, getting back to your other question, from 1946 to 1973, productivity in the country doubled, and so did wages. They were tied together. And the interesting thing about that is the people in the bottom two quartiles, their wages were raising faster than the people at the top, and so the wage gap and inequality was actually collapsing. During that period of time, we represented about 35 to 40% of the workforce. So we were driving wages. We were driving wages not only for union folks, but we were driving wages for non-union folks. They got raises because we negotiated raises and better benefits and time off and weekends and all the things that we did. In 73, things started to change. First, it was the appointment of Paul Volcker as the Fed secretary, and he said, although he has two jobs, his job is to fight inflation and to create full employment, he said at that time, I will no longer concern myself with full employment, I will only concern myself with fighting inflation. And that's been the position under every president, Democrat or Republican alike, till this very day. We're now down to 12% of the workforce. We don't drive wages for everybody. See, we think that collective bargaining is the cornerstone to a balanced economy, so that everybody has a chance to get a little bit more of the wealth that we produce. Because it is not that this nation doesn't have money. We do have money. We're the richest nation we've ever been. Corporations that had 2 years of record profits, over $2 trillion sitting in the bank. Banks have 1.6 trillion sitting in the bank. They're not lending, and they want to continue to shrink their way out of it. If, as Paul said, and Erica and Aijen all said, if we create jobs, you grow your way out of this, the revenue increases, and you don't have to worry about cutting back. You have to worry about giving a future and investing in the future, whether it's a great education for our children that need an education. That helps break the cycle. Whether it's converting bad jobs into good jobs. Because you remember, I came out of the coal industry. Coal mining jobs were bad jobs before we had a union. Auto workers were bad jobs. Steel workers were bad jobs. We made them good jobs with collective bargaining. So it's up to us. It's up to us to come together, come up with an economic agenda, and keep people on it. Don't let them digress into this deficit nonsense that says the only way that we can go forward is to keep cutting benefits and eating our seed corn, if you want. Forcing people to invest in infrastructure, forcing them to invest in all kind of job-creating green jobs that'll save energy and give us a better future. Those are the tickets forward, and that's the way that we grow and actually create an economy that does give every kid a chance. Because right now, we still have a couple of kids out of 5 that go to bed hungry every night in this country, richest nation on the face of the earth. That's intolerable. That's unacceptable. We still have people, elderly people that don't have health care. They can't buy medicine. In the richest nation on the face of the earth, that's unacceptable. That's intolerable. And we can change that. We, all of us can.
I'm going to start taking some of the first questions from the audience. And the first one actually dovetails nicely with a point that Rich made about the decision by the Federal Reserve to basically let go one of its twin imperatives. And I think this is like a really important point that it's important for particularly the progressive blogosphere to be able to understand and speak fluently about. So I'm going to ask our great economics explainer-in-chief over here to tell us, A, why it is that the Fed is so scared of inflation, and whose interests are served when we don't have high inflation.
Okay.
And then what can the Fed do to bring down unemployment?
Wow. So this is I have to say, this is one of those cases where I probably suffer a little bit from what I usually manage to avoid, which is the pundit's disease of being too close to the people that you should be bashing. Because Ben Bernanke before being, he was actually chairman of the economics department at Princeton before being demoted to his current position. So what's going on there? I think it's not it's not in the case of the Fed, it's not the kind of rawness that you're seeing. It's not like the Koch brothers are holding secret meetings with the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, right? But it's more a question of who you hang out with. It is sort of the nature of the beast, unless you fight it really hard, which the current Fed management is not doing, is that you are going to spend a lot more time hanging out with Wall Street, basically with the creditors, if you like, than you will with workers. Unemployed workers do not often attend meetings of the Federal Reserve, and so there is this natural bias to be deathly afraid of anything that is seen as hurting bondholders, anything that's seen as hurting creditor interests. I think that's part of it. Coupled with, there is a pretty strong, for being a central banker, what you're raised to do is to learn that you're supposed to be tough and hard. That famously, you're supposed to take away the punch bowl just as the party is really getting going, and that unfortunately translates into a set mindset where you take away the punch bowl even though there was no party to begin with, and sometimes you have to go even beyond. Our depression now is not as bad as the Great Depression. The Federal Reserve is not as bad as the European Central Bank. Again, one of those great, not a very encouraging thing. But there's a phrase, I actually have to find out who's responsible for it. The phrase was sadomonetarism. This sort of sense that you're doing your job right if you're inflicting pain. So I think all of that's going on, but and right now it's becoming something very strange is going on, because literally they're not making sense at the Fed. They're actually saying it's not just Ben who's so I do know these people, right? It's not just Ben. It's Janet Yellen who's the deputy and who I like a lot, and they're simultaneously saying, well, there's more things we could do, but we're not ready to do them. But the economy is in terrible shape, and we're not even going to hit our inflation target. Inflation is going to be below our inflation target, and of course unemployment is way above what it should be. But for some reason we're not going to do anything, and something is going on, which I think is this mixture of class interests, but in a kind of subtle way, absorbed by the Borg, assimilated by the Borg. It turns out that when I put that in my article about Ben Bernanke, the Times Magazine editors didn't know what that meant, so I had to include an explanation.
Didn't know what class interests meant?
No, well, that too. They didn't know what assimilated by the Borg meant either. And then this just general. So the point is now it's not easy. One of the things that we did, we went through a long stretch of believing that technocrats at the Fed could always do what was necessary to rescue the economy, which was wrong. It turns out that when you have a really, really severe crisis like what we've got now, monetary policy is not enough. You need the government to step in with spending as well. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do, and the Fed could be doing a lot more, and in particular the Fed could be signaling very clearly that it will not start raising rates at the first hint that the labor market might actually be strong enough to generate some wage increases, which is what it's doing right now.
Yeah. So there's sort of a major cognitive problem that we face as progressives trying to explain why it is that the economy is performing the way it is, why it is that Americans are suffering, and who's responsible. And I think one of the major problems is that the American people, and most people around the globe, but more here in this country, don't see the economy as something that people are controlling and setting. People view the economy as something like the weather, a sort of set of natural forces that are impersonal, that you have to sort of batten down the hatches when sort of an economic storm rolls in, and that there's not very much that people have done to put us in this position, and there isn't very much that we collectively or that the government can do to get us out of it. So that's sort of one of those sort of deep problems that we face, and it feels like all of the solutions that we would be advocating require getting over that hump. So Erica, how is it that when you are trying to advocate for progressive economic solutions, you deal with that core problem?
So what I try to think of is you're telling a story. Okay, and any story has a set of plot points. And so some plot points are naturally existing, and then some plot points you need to create for yourself. But if you think of, the unemployment figures come out, the inflation numbers come out, blah, 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 all of these are plot points at which time you have another opportunity to tell a piece of the story. And I always talk to my team about needing to know, we want to know what we're doing, and then what we're really doing, and then what we're really, really doing. So when you look at the Patriotic Millionaires campaign, for example, if you raise taxes on millionaires, great, but it doesn't solve all of the problem. But what we've done with that is we've inserted the word patriotic into the discussion around taxes. So if you think about the government as a company, which everybody is obsessed with doing, but there's not a CEO on the planet who would take the job if they had 100 people who could veto every decision they made. Okay, so that's just on the company point. But if you look at these as plot points, what you want to do is understand those levels underneath that you're trying to do. And one of the issues with financial reform, which was impossible to message, is that when people hear the words derivatives, they fall asleep, right? I mean, these things that it's hard, complex ideas to get your mind around, except that it really isn't. Because it's pretty simple, in my opinion. A bunch of rich, privileged guys stole all our money. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And I know it's more complicated, but I don't have the disadvantage of being close to Ben Bernanke. And No, yeah.
No, it's a real problem.
And I mean, this is where I think it's important for lots of people to play different roles. So if y'all will get out your telephones and just plug in, I mean, our pitch this week is if you give us 5 minutes a day, we can help move this along. So every issue you care about, environment, Social Security, Medicare, all of these, if you get out your phone and just put in the following number, it's 202-452-2955. 202-452-2955. That's Ben Bernanke's phone number at the Fed, okay? But, I mean, whatever. Jamie Dimon, who is the president of JP Morgan Chase, has been walking around since the financial crisis, acting like he's smarter than everybody else, and if only people did what he did, they wouldn't have lost all their money in the financial crisis. Well, then 2 weeks ago, he lost $3 billion in a single trade. So guess what? You don't know what you're doing anyway, I mean, so this is the thing. So he shouldn't be on the board of the New York Fed. Okay? He shouldn't be on the board of the New York Fed. End of story. And is that going to solve everything? Of course it's not going to solve everything, but what it does is it's a little plot point in people's heads. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. You take those moments to take down the power structures that are standing in the way of good progressive policy. And you take them down one by one, systematically, and then when you have big opportunities, you grab those big opportunities, but you've set yourself up to take that victory.
So this question is from...
So y'all need to use the number and call him and tell him to have Jamie Dimon resign from the Fed. Thanks.
So Erica just said you need to use that number. There you go.
202. What, y'all didn't write it down the first time? I repeated it twice. You didn't think it was important? 202-452-2955. It goes directly to his office, and just say you're calling and you think that he should get rid of Jamie Dimon from the board of the Fed. And just do it once a day for the next couple weeks. It'll be fun.
And also possibly tell him to end this depression now, I think, right?
Yeah.
So a question from the audience is, I think, an important one here. And I'm going to pose it to Aijin. How do you talk about increasing wages when people are just grateful to have jobs?
It's a great question. Can you hear me? The slogan that we use a lot in our organizing is protect what we've earned and create what we need. So as we fight to protect our jobs, as we fight to keep our jobs, as we fight to protect Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, we actually need to simultaneously be fighting to create what we actually need in this country. And fundamentally, if we don't put out there what it is that we need, we'll never be able to build the movement we need that has the power we need to actually change this country once and for all of us. And I think it's a question, Van Jones often talks about this notion that our demands have been too small to win. We've relegated ourselves to the defensive fights, to the and to the narrow issue-based kinds of demands that have not allowed us to unite the broad cross-sections of people and interests and just folks, communities, workers that we actually need to be able to unite to build the power we need to take back this country and to really move towards our hopes and dreams, not only for ourselves, but for our children. So I would say that we do absolutely need to work to fight to protect what it is we have, but if we don't assert what is right and what we need for ourselves and for future generations, we'll never get there.
So this was kind of a fun question that came from the audience. Has anybody on this panel been contacted by the White House to ask them what they should do about the economy?
Well, yeah. I mean, trying to think about what I can talk about and what I can't. But no, I mean, and unfortunately, this is public knowledge. There were some early meetings with what you might call the left opposition economists, with the president and others. And there was a critical period, really early in the administration, when the president had the most leverage and might have been able to do much more. And there was Joe Stiglitz and Robert Reich and me and other people, and we lost those arguments. Maybe it was the beards. It was, but it was, I think, this problem, which is that the very serious people, the guys the guys who must know what they're doing because they're so rich, even in an Obama White House, came across as actually having the answers. At this point, I do think that the president and the people around him have figured out that they didn't, but they have very limited room for maneuver. But no, there was a critical moment there when we could have done much more, which unfortunately passed. But it's not. If your notion is that it's all is lost, that particularly if your notion is that Obama and company are as bad as the rest and don't pay any attention to, that's wrong. There is an open line of communication. They are listening. Unfortunately, they do still, to some extent, listen to those other people, but it's not a lost cause at all. So yes, So anyway, the answer to the original question was yes, but unfortunately, I'm afraid they didn't start to listen until it was too late to do a lot of what should have been done.
So I actually think that most of us here have been able to express our views at some point or another with members of the White House. And it seems like the answer was always, show me the 51st vote, show me the 60th vote, show me the political reality. That was before the 2010 midterm election, right? We are now faced with a Republican House with an insane economic agenda barreling down at us, which is the Ryan plan, the Romney plan, whatever it is that anyone sort of who's being taken seriously on the right is advocating, and the cure for it, the moderate cure for it, is suddenly somehow Simpson Bowles, which is a complete repudiation of the New Deal. That's not a complete repudiation of the New Deal. It is a fundamental undoing of the last 60 years, let's put it that way. And so A, how do we make a new political reality? And B, what would we actually say if we got into sort of a back and forth with the political strategists at the White House, and we said you should do this, this, and this to recreate the middle class, create 10 million jobs, and they say we don't have the votes. What can we actually do in this moment, and how do we get it to move?
I really believe that we got to say our word, our program, and stick with it. And we force them to come this way. Now think about this. A couple of years ago, this president was against same-sex marriages. This group, network, you took that issue on, and as much as anybody, you convinced that president that he had to come over to the right side of that issue. If all of us, and you ought to give yourselves a round of applause because you deserve it for that. That's what I'm saying. All of us have to start staking out some territory and staying with it, publicly and privately with them. Talking about, whenever the president was talking about debt reduction, he forgot about job creation, you know, we went public, and a lot of us started talking about he's making a strategic mistake, he's off in la-la land, this is not going to happen. And finally, he realized that he was in their backyard playing their game on their rules, on their turf, and it wasn't going to work for him or for us. And so he came our way, and he started talking about jobs and job creation. And yeah, you still have to have a reality of getting the votes, but that's up to us. If we come together and we build popular support, a popular demand for those things, they won't have a choice. And if the Republicans continue to be obstructionists, they'll get rolled over just like a bowling ball knocks some pins over. And we'll have a different set and a different game to play with. So sticking with our story, demanding it, not being ashamed, not just whispering it behind our hands to members of the administration in private, but saying it publicly to them as well. This is the solution. Job creation, job creation, job creation will ultimately get you where you want to go. And by the way, let's not forget about a couple of things that we talked about earlier. You know, the powers that be really want us to believe that there's nothing we can do about this. That this is just sort of we're grains of sand on the beach and we get washed back and forth. Don't even try to resist. That's nonsense. This is about policy. It was a policy that let trillions of dollars out with the Bush tax cuts. Those trillions of dollars could have been used to build this country, education, roads, infrastructure, green energy. So we just got to keep pushing at it, because it's not hopeless, and we are not poor. These are decisions and policy decisions, so stick together, articulate those policies, and don't back up, and don't apologize for them. That's our biggest mistake, I think. We say, oh yeah, we know these public employees, yeah, I know they have pensions, but no, they have pensions and they ought to have pensions. Everybody ought to have a good pension. I'm not ashamed of that, right?
Heather, I just want to build on this point. I think it's so important. These are choices that are made by people who have the ability to make other choices, okay? So the financial crisis, which cost this country, one of the stupidest things I've ever heard us let them get away with is that when the banks paid back the $750 billion that they'd paid us back, okay, so if a car runs into a crowd of people and kills 20 of them, and then we give them money to fix that car, that's not the sum total of the cost, okay? So they have not paid back what they did to this country, number one, okay? And I'm not gonna believe that they paid it back until we get some money in the bank and until a bunch of them go to jail, okay? So during the S&L crisis, there were about 1,000 felony convictions. There have been 0 felony convictions in this. And I'd like to also, this is one of these things, Simon Johnson, for those of y'all who are able to come to his panel, Simon wrote 13 Bankers. And so speaking of policy choices, you know, Brooksley Born was arguing with Larry Summers and Bob Rubin, and I can't remember, Alan Greenspan. She wanted to release a concept paper about the problem that derivatives would potentially cause the country. Larry Summers called her and said, I have 13 bankers in my office who are telling me if you release this concept paper, you could cause the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Okay, so concept paper, dangerous. Unregulated derivatives market, not dangerous, okay? And the idea that this administration and plenty of Democrats listen to the Bobbies, That's what I call them, the Bob Reubenites. All his little, his cadre of followers, they move around in packs around New York, okay? Everybody's listening to the Bobbies. This is Bobby's fault. Bobby ended Glass-Steagall and walked into Citigroup the next day and made $50 million, okay? So I think we need to bring that story and bring it hard, because that's a chunk of the problem that we have. And again, it's not that complicated of a story.
I just want, one of the big problems that I think that we had with the White House in the early months was that they had this notion, I think Rahm Emanuel said, putting points on the board. You got to win every legislative battle. If you advance a proposal and Congress doesn't go for it, that, oh, that's a terrible thing, and we're going to just add, which was actually just bad political thinking. The public doesn't know. The public doesn't care. The public knows two things. They know how the economy is doing, which at this point, unfortunately, you don't have too much impact on right now, and they also know whether you stand for something. And so then what you can do, well, it really depends which way I'm pointing here. What you can do is you can stand for something. You can keep hammering it. You can say, these people, those do nothing, Republicans in Congress are on the wrong side. I stand for something. And that's advice not just for the current administration, but for everybody involved here. It is, give it to the right. They play a long game. They spent 40 plus years getting us to this point. They started with things that seemed like crazy, hopeless dreams for them. Their dreams look like our nightmares, but they started with these crazy, hopeless dreams about things like eliminating the estate tax and privatizing Social Security. And by hammering at those things, they unfortunately brought those things pretty close to reality. So so the point is, stand for something. Stand for and they have the advantage of 100 to 1, 2 orders of magnitude greater financing. But certainly on all the issues I've been writing about, progressives have one other advantage, which is that we're actually right.
So speaking of this long game, if we look at our long game of the next 40 years out, in 2062, we are going to be a country where there is no racial majority anymore. And I'd like to argue and get some thoughts from the panel here that they, on the right, have seen that 40-year game in a much clearer way than we have on the left. I was at a meeting with a high-level executive official, and he held up a map that the Lawyers Committee has created, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights has created, that shows where all of the attacks on our freedom to vote have happened. And then you can hold up a map of the 2008 election. And then you can actually do a third thing. Unfortunately, that map wasn't in the room in the moment, where you can hold up a map of the demographic concentrations of people of color in this country, and it maps pretty well. So they have already recognized on the right that this little experiment we call democracy is fundamentally going to be a losing game for them, and that they need to attack our freedom to vote in order to keep hold of power. They have recognized that they need to attack the strongest remaining set of unions in this country, and they've recognized that one of the reasons why is because it's where a majority of people of color are able to hold a secure to some middle-class jobs. They've done that calculation in a way that I don't think, I'd like to argue, that we on the left have really seen that our fates in this country are linked with the sort of unfinished business of creating real healing around our racial divisions and suppressing the racial anxiety that still sort of marks all of our political debates in one way or another. So there are some people on this stage who are more than most of us able to have a microphone about what it's going to take to build the kind of country we want. And I think there's a challenge today because that microphone, when it comes to race, is so often silenced, right? I wonder what it is that we can do to fill the void of silence around racial anxiety and to take that microphone away from the right that talks about race all the time and talk about it in a way that is actually bringing us together instead of forcing us apart.
Well, first of all, I'm so excited about that. I don't know about anybody else in the room, but when it first moved over that California was the first minority-majority state, I just got so excited. I'm sick of the old rich white dudes being in charge of everything, you know, and so I'm thrilled. And so first of all, I think, you know, looking at that change is an amazing, positive and wonderful thing within this room is a great, you know, first step. There was for anybody who was at the Ignite panel last night, there was a wonderful woman who did a presentation on if you want to change the world, be friends with somebody different than you, you know, as a first step, which I thought that was marvelous. And so you're right, they have systematically gone about this and repressing the vote. So if I was going to say some of the things that we should systematically go after, Social Security privatization, as Paul said, was a 25-year effort. You know, two of the things we need to do are get rid of Grover Norquist and get rid of the Chamber of Commerce. You know, I mean, those need to be two strategic imperatives. If you're looking at the world you want to build versus the world that you have, what are the things standing in the way of those? Grover Norquist is preventing politicians who, by the way, will do whatever they need to do to get reelected, really. I mean, our job is to change the dynamics under which they believe they're running. And so Grover Norquist has been one of these stoppers. You know, so we got to get rid of Grover Norquist, and we got to kind of do whatever we need to do to get rid of Grover Norquist so that those politicians in Washington want space between themselves and that guy and that pledge. And then the Chamber of Commerce is the biggest lie in American life. The idea that they walk around like they speak for American business when they speak for 49 multinational corporations who underwrite 50% of their budget. Again, you know, it's not complicated, really. You know, yeah, we call them derivatives, we call them this, we call them that, you know, but this is really about a small number of entitled rich guys. And I'll tell you, I saw a study one time that said extremely wealthy people, they studied what are their common characteristics: risk-loving, risk-averse, well-educated, not well-educated, whatever. The single only common characteristic was a willingness to live in the ethical gray areas. Think about that.
Paul?
Yeah, I just want to say, think about, I really think there's a small but significant victory that you can point to recently, which is ALEC. We've all heard about ALEC, which was operating completely under the radar and doing enormous amounts of damage and continuing to do enormous amounts of damage. But small groups of activists, researchers have been documenting, and finally they brought that stuff above water, and by no means have killed it, but we've actually seen, I don't know if somebody has the count, but we've now seen a significant number of corporations dropping their connection with ALEC, because we've managed to do what you want, which was to turn them from being something people would kowtow to something that they were afraid to see their name associated with. And of course, there will be a lot of what they do will pop up under different names. There's a really strong whack-a-mole aspect to all of this stuff. But it does show that you can do this. That in fact, if you can shine the public light, if you can get the activists out there, if you can bring it to people's attention, by and large, if it's, what can I say? We are still a democracy, if we can keep it, to echo Ben Franklin. And if we can shine that light, you can win victories. And just we need many more of that, and persistence. Always keep on plugging.
Rich?
I think Aijen should get a chance to say something.
Yeah, I've not said enough.
Rich, you missed my plan. I was going to give Aijen the last word.
Oh, okay.
I was taking care.
Well, you know, first of all, it's a short-term strategy that the Republicans and the right are using, because it is going to be a different world, and they should be trying to bring them in and have policies that really affect people in a positive way, not try to step on us. And so their strategy is a short-term one. As Paul said, ALEC got together with 2,000 state legislators after the 2010 election and passed these bills around, model bills, their avowed purpose was to reduce the progressive vote in the country by 10% in 2012. Hence, they come after us for collective bargaining. They come after students. They come after immigrants. They come after seniors. They come after everybody out there, the elderly as well, that try to cut back on our vote. It's a short-term strategy. It's corrosive to democracy. The American public ultimately understands fair play. They think this isn't fair play, and I believe that it's going to cost them dearly in this election because of what they did. We sent them there to create jobs and right an economy, and they didn't do that. They made war on employees and the general public, so I think they're going backwards. And I'll just close by saying this. I want to thank Netroots for doing this, for all that you do every day. And I want to tell you what an honor it is for me to be on the podium with you and with Ai-jen and with Erica and with Paul. These are people that really are fighting every day to make a better world and to make this a better place. One that we studied about in our civics books that we really don't recognize today, trying to create an economy that'll let everybody get a chance to get ahead, where our kids and their kids do better. I just want to say to each one of you, thank you for what you do every single day. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick. Ai-jen?
So I'll just say two things. One is that the economic reality for today is a tremendous opportunity to make a different set of choices around how we deal with, around race, around class, around generation. And I think that we can create economic solutions that actually address and help to heal some of the past exclusions and inequities that are based on race and gender and all of the forces that we've been confronted with. And I think that we can create jobs that prioritize jobs for people who've been historically underemployed, people who've been formerly incarcerated people, immigrants. We can think about job creation strategies that really do help to address a leveling of the playing field that has been historically embedded in our country over history and over time. And I think that there's a tremendous basis for unity and coming together. There's more than ever that we share as Americans in this country today. And that from that place of shared experience and understanding one another's stories as part of the 99%, we can build a 99% movement in this country that actually helps us do a fundamental reset, right? That helps us reshape the economy and all of our visions. There's room enough, there's resources enough, there's talent enough, and there are solutions enough that all of us can actually see our hopes and dreams realized in the American democracy. But it is up to us to build that type of movement and to build those types of solutions that actually address all of these things. So,
You're here.
All right, everyone. We have just a few short months to make a very strong statement about the country that we are, the degree to which we won't turn back, and the kind of economy that we need in order to recreate a strong, diverse, growing middle class for all of us. These people on this stage are every single day writing about, fighting about, caring about, researching about the solutions and the strategies to make that happen. It's your job as bloggers, as online activists, as advocates to make sure that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and to make sure that this is not the only time that you engage with their ideas. So you can find them all online. You can, in some cases, I think, call them like you call Ben Bernanke this weekend.
Tell him I said hi.
Tell America Pay said gives her best. And you can make sure that we are creating an echo chamber for the kind of country and the values that we want. So I want to thank everybody. Please join me in thanking this incredible panel. And have a great rest of Netroots Week. Thank you.
For highly respected people, I think he uses that phrase, like Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson, and there's a phrase I picked up. I don't know. Is Duncan Black here? I don't know. But anyway, there's a phrase I picked up from Duncan Black, aka Atrios, that I've loved and use, applies to everything, which is very serious people, capital V, capital S, capital P. And what we've had is we've been living under the tyranny of the very serious people, who are partly defending class interests and partly just plain getting it wrong. Just going with their prejudices instead of what we know from textbook economics, what we know from 80 years of historical experience, and are messing this up. And we could solve this. Solving this depression is not fundamentally an economic problem. It's a political problem. It's a problem of getting getting those very serious people out of the way and doing what we actually already know, which is why gatherings like this are important. Thank you all. Thanks.
So I just have to say one quick housekeeping thing. The clock is not on, and I will let these people talk all morning. So if you want me to do my job here, you should turn the clock on. So, Rich.
Okay, that's a win. When the Senate Minority Leader is protesting that he is not, in fact, trying to throw Granny off the cliff, that's a win. So when we're talking about creating messages that break through, the way that we view our job is to look at the public policy process as this endless cycle of product development, packaging, and marketing and distribution. And the product may be a specific piece of legislation, it may be a value system. Ideally, those two things are connected, right? But the distribution is where all the cost is. So I spent a lot of time working on financial reform, and during the period of time that I worked on financial reform, the left spent $2 or $3 million advocating for effective financial reform in the wake of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. During that same period of time, the bank spent $600 million on lobbyists. And so there's an order of magnitude difference in financial resources that we have to use as the given to our problem solving. Okay, so we have to understand that they have $300 to our $1, $200 to our $1. So what we've got to do is find places where we can get $200 of impact for a dollar that we spend. So $3,500, for 20 million media impressions, you're getting in that range. Our Patriotic Millionaires campaign, which is 200 amazing folks.
As hurting bondholders, anything that's seen as hurting creditor interests. I think that's part of it. Coupled with, there is a pretty strong, for being a central banker, what you're raised to do is to learn that you're supposed to be tough and hard, that famously you're supposed to take away the punch bowl just as the party is really getting going. And that unfortunately translates into a mindset where you take away the punch bowl even though there was no party to begin with. And sometimes you have to go even beyond. Our depression now is not as bad as the Great Depression. The Federal Reserve is not as bad as the European Central Bank. Again, one of those great, not a very encouraging thing. But there's a phrase, I actually have to find out who's responsible for it. The phrase was sadomonetarism. This sort of sense that you're doing your job right if you're inflicting pain. So I think all of that's going on, but and right now it's becoming something very strange is going on because literally they're not making sense at the Fed. They're actually saying it's not just Ben who's so I do know these people, right? It's not just Ben. It's Janet Yellen who's the deputy and who I like a lot and they're simultaneously saying, well, there's more things we could do, but we're not ready to do them.
Advantage of being close to Ben Bernanke. And
No,
yeah.
No, it's a real problem.
This is where I think it's important for lots of people to play different roles. So if y'all will get out your telephones and just plug in, our pitch this week is if you give us 5 minutes a day, we can help move this along. So every issue you care about, environment, Social Security, Medicare, all of these. If you get out your phone and just put in the following number, it's 202-452-2955. 202-452-2955. That's Ben Bernanke's phone number at the Fed. Okay? But, I mean, whatever. You know, Jamie Dimon, who is the president of JP Morgan Chase, has been walking around since the financial crisis acting like he's smarter than everybody else, and if only people did what he did, they wouldn't have lost all their money in the financial crisis. Well, then 2 weeks ago, he lost $3 billion in a single trade. So guess what? You don't know what you're doing anyway. You know? I mean, so this is the thing. So he shouldn't be on the board of the New York Fed. Okay? He shouldn't be on the board of the New York Fed. End of story. And is that going to solve everything? Of course it's not going to solve everything, but what it does is it's a little plot point in people's heads. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. You know, you take those moments to take down the power structures that are standing in the way.
That the rich had a party and we get to pay yet again for the party that they had that we weren't attending to. Now, getting back to your other question, from 1946 to 1973, productivity in the country doubled, and so did wages. They were tied together. And the interesting thing about that is the people in the bottom two quartiles, their wages were raising faster than the people at the top, and so the wage gap and inequality was actually collapsing. During that period of time, we represented about 35 to 40% of the workforce. So we were driving wages. We were driving wages not only for union folks, but we were driving wages for non-union folks. They got raises because we negotiated raises and better benefits and time off and weekends and all the things that we did. In 73, things started to change. First, it was the appointment of Paul Volcker as the Fed secretary, and he said, although he has two jobs, his job is to fight inflation and to create full employment. He said at that time, I will no longer concern myself with full employment. I will only concern myself with fighting inflation. And that's been the position under every president, Democrat or Republican alike, till this very day. We're now down to future. Those are the tickets forward, and that's the way that we grow and actually create an economy that does give every kid a chance. Because right now, we still have a couple of kids out of 5 that go to bed hungry every night in this country, richest nation on the face of the earth. That's intolerable. That's unacceptable. We still have people, elderly people, that don't have health care. They can't buy medicine. In the richest nation on the face of the earth, that's unacceptable. That's intolerable. And we can change that. All of us can.
I'm going to start taking some of the first questions from the audience. And the first one actually dovetails nicely with a point that Rich made about the decision by the Federal Reserve to basically let go one of its twin imperatives. And I think this is like a really important point that it's important for particularly the progressive blogosphere to be able to understand and speak fluently about. So I'm going to ask our great economics explainer-in-chief over here to tell us, A, why it is that the Fed is so scared of inflation, and whose interests are served when we don't have high inflation.
Okay.
And then what can the Fed do to bring down unemployment?
Wow.
In out some territory and staying with it, publicly and privately with them. Talking about, whenever the president was talking about debt reduction, he forgot about job creation, you know, we went public, and a lot of us started talking about he's making a strategic mistake, he's off in la-la land, this is not going to happen. And finally, he realized that he was in their backyard playing their game on their rules, on their turf, and it wasn't going to work for him or for us. And so he came our way, and he started talking about jobs and job creation. And yeah, you still have to have a reality of getting the votes, but that's up to us. If we come together and we build popular support, a popular demand for those things, they won't have a choice. And if the Republicans continue to be obstructionists, they'll get rolled over just like a bowling ball knocks pins over. And we'll have a different set and a different game to play with. So sticking with our story, demanding it, not being ashamed, not just whispering it behind our hands to members of the administration in private, but saying it publicly to them as well. This is the solution. Job creation, job creation, job creation will ultimately get you where you want to go. And by the way, let's not forget about a couple of things that we talked about earlier. You know, the powers that be.
And the cure for it, the moderate cure for it, is suddenly somehow Simpson Bowles, which is a complete repudiation of the New Deal. That's not a complete repudiation of the New Deal. It is a fundamental undoing of the last 60 years. Let's put it that way. And so, where with it, A, how do we make a new political reality? And B, what would we actually say if we got into sort of a back and forth with the political strategists at the White House, and we said you should do this, this, and this to recreate the middle class, create 10 million jobs, and they say we don't have the votes. What can we actually do in this moment, and how do we get it to move?
I really believe that we got to say our word, our program, and stick with it. And we force them to come this way. Now think about this. A couple of years ago, this president was against same-sex marriages. This group, network, you took that issue on, and as much as anybody, you convinced that president that he had to come over to the right side of that issue. If all of us, and you ought to give yourselves a round of applause because you deserve it today. That's what I'm saying. All of us have to start staking out some territory and staying with it, publicly and privately with them. Talking about
in order to keep hold of power. They have recognized that they need to attack the strongest remaining set of unions in this country, and they've recognized that one of the reasons why is because it's where a majority of people of color are able to hold a secure to some middle class jobs. They've done that calculation in a way that I don't think, I'd like to argue, that we on the left have really seen that our fates in this country are linked with the sort of unfinished business of creating real healing around our racial divisions and suppressing the racial anxiety that still sort of marks all of our political debates in one way or another. So there are some people on this stage who are more than most of us able to have a microphone about what it's going to take to build the kind of country we want. And I think there's a challenge today because that microphone, when it comes to race, is so often silenced, right? I wonder what it is that we can do to fill the void of silence around racial anxiety and to take that microphone away from the right that talks about race all the time and talk about it in a way that is actually bringing us together instead of forcing us apart.
Well, first of all, I'm so excited about that. I don't know about anybody else in the room, and we released it right as Paul Ryan's budget last year was coming out. And what you saw happen in the media cycle was that the phrase off the cliff, off the cliff, off the cliff went everywhere during this period of time. So we have Mitch McConnell protesting that no one's trying to throw Granny off the cliff. You know, and when you get them in that position, you know, then that's a win. Okay, that's a win. When the Senate Minority Leader is protesting that he is not, in fact, trying to throw Granny off the cliff, that's a win. So when we're talking about creating messages that break through, the way that we view our job is to look at the public policy process as this endless cycle of product development, packaging, and marketing and distribution. And the product may be a specific piece of legislation, it may be a value system. Ideally, those two things are connected, right? But the distribution is where all the cost is. So I spent a lot of time working on financial reform, and during the period of time that I worked on financial reform, the left spent $2 or $3 million advocating for effective financial reform in the wake of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. During that same period of time, the bank spent $600 million on lobbyists. And so there's an order of magnitude difference in financial resources that we have to use as the given.
It's corrosive to democracy. The American public ultimately understands fair play. They think this isn't fair play, and I believe that it's going to cost them dearly in this election because of what they did. We sent them there to create jobs and right an economy, and they didn't do that. They made war on employees and the general public, so I think they're going backwards. And I'll just close by saying this. I want to thank Netroots for doing this, for all that you do every day. And I want to tell you what an honor it is for me to be on the podium with you and with Ijen and with Erica and with Paul. These are people that really are fighting every day to make a better world and to make this a better place. One that we studied about in our civics books that we really don't recognize today, trying to create an economy that'll let everybody get a chance to get ahead, where our kids and their kids do better. I just want to say to each one of you, thank you for what you do every single day. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Ijen?
So I'll just say two things. One is that the economic reality for today is a tremendous opportunity to make a different set of choices around how we deal with, around race, around class, around generation. And I think
Rich made about the decision by the Federal Reserve to basically let go one of its twin imperatives. And I think this is like a really important point that it's important for particularly the progressive blogosphere to be able to understand and speak fluently about. So I'm going to ask our great economics explainer-in-chief over here to tell us, A, why it is that the Fed is so scared of inflation, and whose interests are served when we don't have high inflation.
Okay.
And then what can the Fed do to bring down unemployment?
Wow. So this is I have to say, this is one of those cases where I probably suffer a little bit from what I usually manage to avoid, which is the pundit's disease of being too close to the people that you should be bashing. Because Ben Bernanke was before being, he was actually chairman of the economics department at Princeton before being demoted to his current position. So what's going on there? I think it's not in the case of the Fed, it's not the kind of rawness that you're seeing. It's not like the Koch brothers are holding secret meetings with the Federal Reserve.
Really move towards our hopes and dreams, not only for ourselves, but for our children. So I would say that we do absolutely need to work to fight to protect what it is we have, but if we don't assert what is right and what we need for ourselves and for future generations, we'll never get there.
So this was kind of a fun question that came from the audience. Has anybody on this panel been contacted by the White House to ask them what they should do about the economy?
Well, yeah. I mean, trying to think about what I can talk about and what I can't. But no, I mean, and unfortunately, this is public knowledge. There were some early meetings with what you might call the left opposition economists, with the president and others. And there was a critical period, really early in the administration, when the president had the most leverage and might have been able to do much more. And there was Joe Stiglitz and Robert Reich and me and other people, and we lost those arguments.
Maybe period of sort of shared prosperity, this golden era between the end of World War II and just about when Ronald Reagan took office, and I at least was born. we had this period of time where incomes rose in tandem, where there was a much smaller gap between CEO pay and average worker pay, where labor unions were strong, where the trade rules, what of that there were, benefited and were conscious of the livelihoods of the producers of the goods that were being exported. All of that has changed in a way that has created fundamental economic insecurity for most Americans. We now have two parents working and able to create a little less security than one parent was able to create on his own a generation ago. We have people going into the workforce without the kind of security that they had with contingent work and contract work and temporary work. And so I'd actually like to challenge a little bit this idea that what we need to do is, maybe spend a little bit now on some short-term spending, but then we should actually spend less than we even have been now because of our long-term deficit. It seems to me like we are actually going to have to do a lot more to put the American people on sound footing. We're going to have to make college debt-free again.
Interest rates, inflation-protected bonds have a negative interest rate. If you had a business that could borrow literally for free and had lots of things that it knows it should be doing, it would be doing that. It would be borrowing that money and spending. So that's what we need to do. And just sorry, I'm going on too long. This deficit obsession, which we all talked about, is the most amazing thing. Because I was shocked that it happened, and we do need to fight it. Yes, in the long run you have to pay your bills, but as John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run we are all dead, and what we need right now is jobs. Can I just say, by the way, I thought that was great.
Thanks.
The way that people get silenced in my line of work is by getting accused of being shrill. That was everybody's very, you've said something, you've not been respectful, you haven't been nasty, but you have to get people's attention. And if some people end up not liking you, that's okay, because they need to get the message out.
Because we get a lot of hate mail, so I'm really happy that it's okay if people hate you. I would love to pick up on what Paul said, Heather, about this household mentality with tightening the belts.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? If you're not feeling the question that's burning in your mind, if it's not being written.
Go forward is to keep cutting benefits and eating our seed corn if you want. Forcing people to invest in infrastructure. Forcing them to invest in all kind of job creating green jobs that'll save energy and give us a better future. Those are the tickets forward, and that's the way that we grow and actually create an economy that does give every kid a chance. Because right now, we still have a couple of kids out of 5 that go to bed hungry every night. In this country, richest nation on the face of the earth. That's intolerable. That's unacceptable. We still have people, elderly people that don't have health care. They can't buy medicine. In the richest nation on the face of the earth, that's unacceptable. That's intolerable. And we can change that. All of us can.
I'm going to start taking some of the first questions from the audience. And the first one actually dovetails nicely with a point that Rich made about the decision by the Federal Reserve to basically let go one of its twin imperatives. And I think this is like a really important point that it's important for particularly the progressive blogosphere to be able to understand and speak fluently about. So I'm going to ask our great economics explainer-in-chief over here to tell us, A, why it's, and I'm going to pose it to Ayajin, how do you talk about increasing wages when people are just grateful to have jobs?
It's a great question. Can you hear me? The slogan that we use a lot in our organizing is protect what we've earned and create what we need. So as we fight to protect our jobs, as we fight to keep our jobs, as we fight to protect Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, we actually need to simultaneously be fighting to create what we actually need in this country. And fundamentally, if we don't put out there what it is that we need, we'll never be able to build the movement we need that has the power we need to actually change this country once and for all of us. And I think it's a question, Van Jones often talks about this notion that our demands have been too small to win. We've relegated ourselves to the defensive fights, to the and to the narrow issue-based kinds of demands that have not allowed us to unite the broad cross-sections of people and interests and just folks, communities, workers that we actually need to be able to unite to build the power we need to take back this country and to really move towards our hopes and dreams, not only for ourselves, but for our children. So I would say that we do absolutely
off the cliff. You know, and when you get them in that position, you know, then that's a win. Okay, that's a win. When the Senate Minority Leader is protesting that he is not, in fact, trying to throw Granny off the cliff, that's a win. So when we're talking about creating messages that break through, the way that we view our job is to look at the public policy process as this endless cycle of product development, packaging, and marketing and distribution. And the product may be a specific piece of legislation, it may be a value system. Ideally, those two things are connected, right? But the distribution is where all the cost is. So I spent a lot of time working on financial reform, and during the period of time that I worked on financial reform, the left spent $2 or $3 million advocating for effective financial reform in the wake of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. During that same period of time, the bank spent $600 million on lobbyists. And so there's an order of magnitude difference in financial resources that we have to use as the given to our problem solving. Okay, so we have to understand that they have $300 to our $1, $200 to our $1. So what we've got to do is find places where we can get $200 of impact for a dollar that we spend. So $3,500, you know, for 20 million media impressions, you're getting in that.
Solving this depression is not fundamentally an economic problem. It's a political problem. It's a problem of getting if you like, getting those very serious people out of the way and doing what we actually already know, which is why gatherings like this are important. Thank you all. Thanks.
So I just have to say one quick housekeeping thing. The clock is not on, and I will let these people talk all morning. So if you want me to do my job here, you should turn the clock on. So, Rich, Paul really laid out a problem here, which I think is a fundamental one at the root of the crisis that we're facing, is that there is a problem of unemployment, of underemployment, of a lack of economic strength and security among the vast majority of working people in this country. And if you look at that problem, there are a set of solutions that have to do with more government spending, that have to do with stronger labor unions, higher wages, that have to allow for a certain amount of inflation. In other words, the progressive economic agenda. If you reshape the problem, that the problem we are in today and the problem we are in across the globe is that the problem is high government deficits. There's an entirely different problem at the state level and at the federal level with that core problem.
So what I try to think of is you're telling a story, okay, and any story has a set of plot points. And so some plot points are naturally existing, and then some plot points you need to create for yourself. But if you think of, you know, the unemployment figures come out, the inflation numbers come out, blah, 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 all of these are plot points at which time you have another opportunity to tell a piece of the story. And I always talk to my team about needing to know, you know, we want to know what we're doing, and then what we're really doing, and then what we're really, really doing. So when you look at the Patriotic Millionaires campaign, for example, if you raise taxes on millionaires, great, you know, but it doesn't solve all of the problem. But what we've done with that is we've inserted the word patriotic into the discussion around taxes. So if you think about the government as a company, which everybody is obsessed with doing, but there's not a CEO on the planet who would take the job if they had 100 people who could veto every decision they made. Okay, so that's just on the company point. But if you look at these as plot points, what you want to do is understand those levels underneath that you're trying to do. And one of the issues with financial reform, which was impossible to message, is that when people hear the words derivatives, they fall asleep, right? I mean, these things that it's hard, complex ideas to get your mind around, except that it really isn't, because it's pretty simple.